me to Nathan, and I've asked them if they would be so kind enough to present to you the options that are out there. So without further ado, I will introduce to you Nathan Greenlay of Home Care.
Thank you very much, Paulina. A pleasure to be here this morning. Thank you very much to everyone in attendance. I hope that the information I provide to you today is useful and informative. If you do have any questions, as Paulina mentioned, please put them in the chat box. I'll open it up right now with a little message of my own. It should pop up on your screen, and feel free to type any questions in there. And we will answer them at the end as to keep the flow of the presentation going. But again, keep in mind that we will get to them all at the end of the presentation. So my name is Nathan Greenlay. I'm the Associate Director for Home Care Assistance Waterloo. We do provide all kinds of home-based care for typically seniors within this region. We've been around since 2015 here. However, the larger franchise is headquartered in California, and there are franchises all over the world. So my focus today is providing you a little bit of information on what you can expect as, of course, you age through retirement, some of the typical scenarios that you might find, and some of the issues that might arise that you could be dealing with as well. So whether this is for yourself, a spouse, or a family member, or a friend, some of this information could be very useful. So Canada's aging population, we've all heard of it, the gray tsunami as they call it. The boomers are approaching retirement age. I would say the front end of that population is here in our seniors demographic now. So right now, we're looking at about 25% of the total population would be over the age of 65 by 2036. That's a huge chunk of the population. Last year, seniors actually surpassed the number of children under 5 for the first time in Canada's recorded history. So seniors are an emerging demographic, let's call it. There are a lot more of them than there used to be. Another stat that I like to kind of start off with is that it's not just the seniors that we're talking about here. Some of the folks who are maybe in this situation may be caring for one of their aging parents, and up to 25% of them are currently doing so. In the next decade, that number will actually rise to over 60% of us as adults who are caring for an aging parent in some way, shape, or form. This has a huge impact on everyone's daily life. As you can definitely appreciate, most folks who are caring for an aging parent are still working. They likely will have kids, whether they're younger or adults themselves. They have very full lives, and the time is not always there to care for their parents as they would like to. Another stat that is very, very commonly expressed when seniors are confronted with retirement and the options is that 9 out of 10 of them would prefer to spend the rest of their lives in their homes. This is not always a possibility. However, we should definitely be addressing their actual wants and needs of the seniors as we move forward. Some other stats to get us started here. Roughly half of all seniors over 65 live with a spouse. This number decreases to about 25% for seniors over 85, as one of the couple will usually pass long before the other. Although communal senior living options are on the rise, these are things like retirement homes, the vast majority of seniors, 90% of them still live in their own homes, even after a spouse passes. This leaves almost a quarter of seniors over 85 living at home alone. This presents a very large risk. The main risk factors are frailty, isolation, and about a quarter of all seniors over 85 suffer from one form or another of dementia. As we age, we run into many complications. Of course, physical decline is one of those complications. So close to 70% of all seniors suffer from at least one, if not two or more, high-impact chronic health conditions. These are conditions that don't necessarily get better but they'll be dealing with them longer term for the rest of their lives. The 8 most common chronic conditions for seniors over 85 are listed below. As you can see, some of them are quite prevalent, such as high blood pressure. Physical decline is preventable to a certain degree. Based on the stats I found on Stats Canada, if you're promoting healthy living, let's call it, if you do 1 to 2 things that are promoting healthy lifestyle, your chances of living in good health for a longer period of time increase. As you can see based on the chart to the side there, the more things that you do to activate a healthy lifestyle, the better your chances are at keeping a healthy body as well. We can address this in many different areas. It's not just about physical health, but we can address diet. Your cognitive mind is another piece that you should address. Social ties, calmness and purpose as well. Complications other than physical health can also arise. Mental health is a big component to aging. I would say that loneliness and loss of purpose are kind of the silent killers, let's call them. These 2 issues are there with most seniors. However, they're not talked about as much as they should be. Loneliness is one of the many factors contributing to a decline overall. And this can be due to so many factors, including the loss of their ability to get out. So, for example, losing a license, the passing of many close family and friends. These are people who may be of the same age demographic. And of course, busy families will visit them less frequently. Loss of purpose is also a big one. As people age into retirement, they can come often from very successful and busy careers. That does happen, that they run into a space now where they are not doing as much as they used to. Their calendars are fairly free and empty. And without that career, getting them up out of bed every day, that can have a huge effect on your mental health. The same goes for a lot of seniors. The women especially would have been at home with the children, stay-at-home mom. The empty nest syndrome, let's call it, can have a huge effect on folks. Without that sense of purpose of caring for the family, that can leave somebody feeling very, very lonely and without purpose. The end result of these 2 factors can be that people will run into depression and or anxiety. These are common mental health issues affecting many seniors. Roughly 10 to 15% of seniors reported dealing with one or the other. Now, of course, as we know, most seniors don't love to admit their issues. They can be a little bit stubborn, like all of us. So that is, again, a reported statistic that they would have self-reported, not necessarily one that was given by doctors. So the number I would guess would be a little bit higher. One of the main factors affecting seniors' mental health these days would be dementia. There are hundreds of different kinds of dementia. Alzheimer's is just one type. As of 2017, close to 50 million people worldwide are living with some form of dementia. And right now, around 700,000 Canadians are living with a form of it. That's roughly 15% of Canadians 65 and older. So if you were to go into a room with seniors, roughly 1 in 5 of them is likely dealing with dementia in some way, shape, or form. That is a very large number. And dementia, it can be very mild, almost unrecognizable at the beginning to those who aren't familiar with it, but it can cause long-term effects. So as we age through some of these areas of decline, whether it's physical or cognitive, seniors will typically look into different options. Living in a home can be a little bit daunting. Things like home maintenance, yard maintenance, snow shoveling, even stairs can present a lot of problems as people decline physically and cognitively. So I'm going to go quickly through the options here that you may or may not be aware of what you can do as things become more difficult in your own home. So one of the main options that people typically think is, well, I'll get rid of the yard maintenance. I'll get rid of the larger home. I don't need that anymore. It's a lot of work. I can't do the work anymore, and I don't want to hire, 2 or 3 different people to do all the maintenance. So a lot of folks consider first and foremost downsizing to an apartment or condo. Of course, the pros there are there's no property maintenance. They are often in an accessible space now on one level with no stairs. Maybe that's a condo with elevators and things like that. The obvious pro there would be that they have a lump sum of cash to invest and use from the sale of a home. The cons are that there's no services provided. So yes, it is a more accessible space. However, you are still potentially dealing with health issues that you may need services to help you with. There, of course, are likely condo fees on top of rent as well. One of the more new items, I guess I'd say, that has come to light in Canada is what's called a sell and stay. This is pretty common over in Europe and in the US as well, but it's less common here in Canada so far. So this option here allows the senior to stay in their home without having to address the maintenance portion. This is an arrangement, it's a legal arrangement. You do need a lawyer to have this happen, where an investor will essentially buy your property from you and then rent it out to you indefinitely. So until you should pass or decide to change your location, then you are the tenant of this new investor. Someone else will now, of course, maintain the home and the property for you, and you never have to move or leave. So there's that benefit in never having that for sale sign on your lawn. For all intents and purposes, your neighbors still think that you own your home, you live in it, and nothing has changed. So there's some form of retained dignity there, where a lot of people hate to admit failure. This can actually kind of keep you in the same space and same situation without having to deal now with the snow, the yard maintenance, and the fixing of roofs and furnaces and all of those things. Another option that people would definitely consider, going back to that stat on the first page, is that most people would want to stay in their homes versus moving out of them. So staying at home with assistance is definitely something that can be arranged. There are 2 categories of assistance here in Ontario. One of them is subsidized care through the LHIN, or Local Health Integration Network. This used to be called CCAC, for those of you who are familiar with that terminology. So the LHIN here in Ontario provides 2 different services. One is home health care for seniors, and the other is access to the long-term care system, or for lack of a better word, the old nursing homes. They're called long-term care nowadays. So the LHIN care is definitely a pro in that it is free. This is a very free service. As a taxpayer in Ontario, you owe nothing when you use this service. It comes right out of your taxes. The cons here are that you must qualify for this based on health conditions. So if you have only, for example, mild incontinence and a little bit of mobility issues there, you may only get a couple hours a week to assist with something like a bath. So it is very limited. The other cons to the free care are that there is likely not going to be continuity of care. What I mean by that is that you will likely see a different person every shift providing you with that care. You're not going to see the same face. So it's going to be a stranger coming into your house every single shift. You may get a repeat here and there, but there's no guarantee. The contracted PSWs through some of the larger service providers under the LHIN can often be late and sometimes don't show. They have a very full plate. They have many, many clients to get to in a day, and you're one of many. So they'll rush through care typically and move on to the next client. It's not as personal as a lot of people would like it to be. The other bucket in which you can obtain stay-at-home assistance is through a private care company. Private care companies offer a lot of pros that the LHIN services do not, such as continuity of care. So you can have the same caregiver providing you care every time they come into your house. You get to know them and can create a relationship with them that way. Our care managers can provide a personalized care plan. So it's not just about giving you a bath and getting you dressed and ready for your day and then out the door. We can provide all kinds of different things as part of that care plan, including addressing someone's spiritual needs, exercising, cognitive needs. All those kinds of things can be addressed within a care plan. And the care managers are then there to adjust the care to your changing needs. We have a 24-hour care line, for example, in which you can call in the case of an emergency or needing to change the hours of service. The con here, of course, is that it is a cost. So depending on how many hours you choose and the quality of service you're getting, there can be a higher cost. We'll get into that in a little bit. One of the other options as people decline, if perhaps they need more socialization or they are really starting to decline physically or cognitively, is moving into a communal living situation. In Ontario, there are 3 categories in which you can choose from. Independent retirement living is, I guess, the most approachable and most common option out there. So independent retirement living is a common space, a building which has various room layouts to choose from and provides non-care services such as meals, housekeeping, and daily activities. The common areas and amenities are typically available, such as exercise rooms, maybe a bar, a lounge, games rooms, things like that. The pricing for independent retirement living is typically all-inclusive, and there's no opting out of the options. So it's a one price pays all, including your rent, utilities, meals, housekeeping, etc. Once you get into a building that has the same setup as independent, but then they add in personal care services, this is what we classify as assisted retirement living. So assisted retirement living has a broad spectrum. Every building is a little bit different. Some of them only perform very basic care items such as bathing, dressing, medication reminders, or administration. Some of the newer homes can actually provide very advanced care, all the way up to what we call memory care in a separate wing or level of the home. So it's like a retirement residence within the residence, specifically for those who are dealing with cognitive decline, so that they don't have the ability to, let's say, leave, wander out on the street and not remember how to get home. So assisted retirement living can provide a very broad spectrum of options. Nursing homes, or now what is termed long-term care, are a 24-hour high level of service kind of facility. Now these ones are heavily subsidized by the Ontario government, and the LHIN, as I mentioned about before, do control the intake of residents to the long-term care system. So although it is heavily subsidized, you do have to qualify for it to get in. So you can't say to yourself, oh, I just want to save a little bit of money, I'm going to long-term care. Unfortunately, you have to qualify, and it's usually those who have very intense care needs, whether they are suffering from more advanced dementia or are mobility challenged in that they wouldn't be able to get around on their own without assistance. Now, this system is very overloaded. There are definitely more people at this point who need it or could use it than there are actual rooms at this point in Ontario. Wait times can vary from 6 months to 2 years, depending on your needs. Typically, if it's a crisis, then you will get in a little bit faster, but you could be waiting up to 2 years if it's just mild care requirements. So when you're looking at these options, which one is right for you? The question there is that there's no right, or the answer to this question is that there's no right answer for anyone. Every individual's path through their retirement years will be slightly different and may involve 2 or more of the options that I listed, or just perhaps one of them. Items to consider as you're moving through these options would be budget, of course. How much can you afford and for how long? Health and care needs is a definite component that you need to consider. Does the option that you're picking allow you to get the care that you require based on your current conditions and also your future condition? Not every option is suitable for every care need. One of the items that people often forget about is the proximity to spouse, family, and friends. Human connection is so important to well-being, and if you're locked into a facility without access to the people that are close to you, there's a very large detrimental effect there. So proximity to spouse, family, friends is something that people should definitely consider when looking at these options. Now just to get a little bit of a picture of cost. All of these options do have a cost associated with them. And approximate costs for this presentation are for within Waterloo region. So for the sell and stay option, the cost of rent is arranged with your new landlord, let's call it, will increase with inflation as the new owner sees fit within the guidelines in Ontario. So they will take care of the maintenance, etc. So those costs are off your plate, but you are then paying them rent. Stay at home with care. The LHIN care, as I mentioned, is free to an Ontario resident, but limited. Without LHIN care, you're looking at roughly $29 to $35 per hour, depending on the services you're getting. Within Waterloo region, there are roughly 50 to 60 different home care companies offering all different kinds of services. Some of them are very focused on physical tasks, such as bathing, dressing, much like what the LHIN does, but private service. And others, such as the one I work for, provide more specialized care and even advanced dementia care within the home. An apartment or condo, I think most people have a grasp on what that would cost. Cost of the rent or mortgage payment plus possible condo fees. As we get into the retirement living options, in the Waterloo region, you're looking at independent living costs between $3,000 and $8,000 per month. This is really dependent on a couple factors. One of them is the size of the room. So the size of the room can vary from a small studio suite, where it's all one living space with a private washroom, to a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom living space, an entire suite, let's call it, where you have a little mini kitchenette, all different kinds of options. So you're looking roughly between $3,000 and $8,000 per month. As soon as you add care services into the picture, you're adding on typically $500 to $1,000 extra per month on top of the living costs of a typical retirement home. So it can actually go between $4,000 to $10,000 per month. Now, in Waterloo region, the $10,000 per month would be in a very high-end residence with full care. So this is not a typical scenario. I would say the average person would be paying between $4,000 and $7,000. That's more of an average, but again, there are places where you can get the top of the line of everything in this region, and it would cost you upwards of $10,000. Long-term care, because it is heavily subsidized, although you're getting more services than you would in independent or assisted, it will roughly cost you between $1,500 and $3,000 per month. This depends on whether you choose a private room or a shared room, and the types of services. Some of the newer buildings are slightly more expensive as well. So a big question I like to pose is when I'm being asked these questions by a potential client, looking grand scheme or big picture, I'd like to ask them if they're prepared for all of these things. I think all of us have a general good idea of what is possible, and we plan for things such as living arrangements, potential income during retirement. So these are things that maybe with your financial advisor you've talked about, and you will have planned for these roughly. But others are completely unpredictable. So your physical health, your mental health, longevity, all of these are not things that we necessarily can plan for. So it's nice to have options laid out should any of these things happen. Let's say for whatever reason your physical health declines and now you're unable to move about on your own. Well, your ideal situation of living at home with care can be perhaps done, but maybe not. We might have to get assistive devices such as lifts, etc., installed in the home, hospital beds. So are you prepared to make all these arrangements, or would it be easier for you to move into a facility? I think it's really good to have these conversations long before they ever happen. I've seen what happens when you don't have the conversations, and it's important to go through every possible scenario and kind of advise your spouse, your family, and your trusted advisors, lawyers, financial advisors, of your potential plans should any of these things happen. The more scenarios you walk through with your close circle, the better prepared you are if any of those things should ever happen. So I'd like to get a little bit into home care as a solution. As long-term care systems fill up and there's longer and longer waiting lists, retirement living kind of takes the brunt from that, and they start getting full as well. So as our systems get more and more packed in these communal living scenarios, home care is a solution that can work for everybody. At this point, the government's kind of playing catch up as far as building new buildings go, and they'll never catch up with the number of people that are coming through the system. So the most obvious option in my mind is to keep people in the homes that they've already paid for, instead of trying to move them into buildings that may not have enough space, and bring the care to them. There's also definite benefits there in that you're not moving into a strange place with strange people. You can stay in the place that you've always been and have someone come to you and provide assistance with the challenges that you are presented with. So there's a lot of pros here. Home care can relieve a caregiver. In a spouse, typically one will decline faster than the other. This leaves the other spouse, who is more well, let's call it, caring for them. And a lot of people just kind of assume that role without thinking of the other options. They think it's their duty to do all of the work. But if someone is over 80 and their spouse is also over 80, caring for somebody, lifting them, dressing them, bathing them, can take a physical toll on that caregiver as well. And over time, that can lead to burnout. And burnout is never a situation we want to be in. It can affect your health. You can get sick more often, and we don't want that. We want both people in a couple to live well to the end of their years. We don't want one to suffer because of the caring component to another. So that's where caregivers can really step in and make a big difference. Activities of daily living, we can assist with things that are very difficult on your own if you're challenged with mobility, things like bathing, dressing, and grooming. There's also the instrumental activities of daily living, IADLs as they call them, such as finances, shopping, transportation, housework. All of these things that we kind of take for granted when we're well become more and more difficult as we decline. With singles, companionship is a big component. As mentioned earlier on, loneliness is a silent stressor. We don't often pay enough attention to it. So companionship, just having somebody there to, yes, perhaps help you with your activities of daily living, but can also become a friend. So someone to talk to, someone to spend time with. Even just the presence of another human being can have a very positive effect on one's health. And of course, dementia care. If someone's suffering from dementia, the spouse who's with them may not know how to address that. Oftentimes, they get frustrated, they get tired. They'll take out their stress on the spouse when it's really nothing they can control. Dementia, as it's a disease, can run its course in many different directions, but you can't get mad at the person because it's not under their control. So having someone who is trained specifically to deal with those who have dementia can really have a positive effect. So home care assistance has a little bit of a different approach on two fronts. One is that we are looking at care as a holistic item. We're not just looking at it as, you know, now that we have you bathed and dressed and ready for your day, we're done our job. There's more to life than that. You can see here that we based the balanced care method, as we call it, on the lifestyle of the longest living people and healthiest people on earth in Japan. The framework includes moderation and variety. So we're really trying to focus on not just physical tasks such as bathing and dressing, but making sure that someone has a healthy diet, making sure they're getting up once in a while, moving about, walking even, making sure that they keep their minds sharp, keeping engaged socially. So even just having the caregiver there can keep that piece intact. The last one is something that we don't address a whole lot, calmness and purpose. Purpose is something that can fall to the wayside very quickly and is not talked about. So we can help definitely reinstate purpose in someone's day-to-day by having a caregiver there, helping them explore new hobbies, new tasks throughout the day, and addressing that need. Home care assistance is also an expert in dementia care. So all of our caregivers are trained with two items. One is gentle persuasive approach. Now this is, I call it a basics on dementia care. This is offered through the Alzheimer's Society as well. So anyone can actually take this day course And it teaches you everything about what it's like to experience dementia as the individual who is suffering, and how to deal with somebody who has it, so that you're being kind and compassionate instead of frustrated and stressed. So GPA can really change your mindset on dementia as a whole. And home care assistance has also created what we call cognitive therapeutics method. It's a proprietary method that we use to engage somebody who has dementia cognitively. I'm going to speak a little bit about dementia, as a lot of folks aren't necessarily well versed in it. Oftentimes, dementia is seen as the memory disease. However, it is so much more than that. It affects 5 different areas of the brain, one of which is the memory component, but it also can affect executive functioning, things like reasoning, problem solving, judgment, the attention span. If you've ever dealt with anyone who has dementia, you may notice that they do not have an attention span. Kind of like the ADHD of seniors, let's call it. They can only focus on things for a couple of minutes at most, and their attention then wanes. The worse the dementia gets in this area, their attention span lessens and lessens. Language. Some folks often have difficulty executing verbal functions. So putting the right words into a sentence, they're repeating themselves, comprehending things, reading, writing, spontaneous outbursts. All of these things can happen as the language area of the brain does degrade. One of the ones that I found the most interesting when learning about dementia for the first time is the visual spatial perception area of the brain. And this is the ability to perceive an object's physical location in relativity to yourself. One of the first things that happens when people are starting to age is that we start to note trips and falls, things like that. Most people will attribute that to frailty. So getting older doesn't necessarily mean just frailty. It can often be due to the visual spatial perception area of the brain declining. So as soon as this area starts to decline, that step that was 2 feet away might not quite be 2 feet away, and you'll miss the step, leading to a fall or trip. So if someone is falling or tripping a lot, I'd recommend them getting tested for dementia. It may be the cause of it. So cognitive therapeutics for brain health is a non-pharmacological approach to engaging someone who has dementia. This has been proven scientifically to have some positive effects. So dementia as a disease does not get better. However, when the pharmacological approaches stop having an effect after about a year, non-pharmacological approaches are your only go-to at this point. So these have been proven to improve mood, improve cognition of surroundings, and all of these things as a whole can be bettered if you are approaching this through a cognitive therapeutics approach. So what cognitive therapeutics looks like when you're actually engaging somebody with it. Essentially, it's a toolkit that the caregiver can engage somebody with multiple times a day or just once a day, depending on the receptivity of the client. Games, puzzles, all kinds of different things are within the toolkit, and there's thousands upon thousands of them, so there's no repetition involved. So again, if somebody is willing and able, we can engage them with simple things such as the ones I'm going to run you through here. These are just a couple examples. So it can be as simple as presenting the client with a couple pictures. These 2 pictures here, and then you ask them a question about the picture. This would address the executive functioning area of the brain. So for example, what are the similarities between these 2 pictures? There is no right or wrong answer. The whole idea here is that we're trying to engage the brain, making it work or exercising it. So, I mean, there's a lot of potential answers here. There's 2 black birds. The backgrounds are both blank. They're both facing to the left. They're both sitting on sticks. Any one of these things could be possible answers. We can also ask an opposing question. What are the differences here? The one has his beak open, the other one doesn't. The one has color on his wing, the other one doesn't. Again, the idea here is to get the mind moving, not necessarily to have a right or wrong answer. This next activity here does work on the executive functioning area of the brain, but also the attention span. We ask somebody to say the color of the text, not the word that is written. So for example, we would say yellow, green, blue, pink, as opposed to the actual word that's written. It's a very challenging exercise. I'll give you a couple seconds if you want to run through it yourself. I find oftentimes once you get to the third row, if you're doing this at a relatively quick speed, things start to kind of fumble a bit, even if we're completely well, not dealing with dementia at all. It was brought to my attention too, a gentleman that I was presenting to 2 weeks ago was colorblind. So this may not be the most appropriate exercise for someone who is colorblind. Just didn't actually think about that until it was mentioned. This activity here does deal with the language area of the brain. So something as simple as counting the number of times that the letter F appears in the following sentence can become very, very challenging for someone who suffers from dementia. So I'll give you a couple seconds here just to count the F's for yourself, just as a fun test, and see how many you find within the sentence. Okay, so if everybody has their answers, I'll show you what the actual answer is, and that would be 6 times. So I know we're all on mute at this point, but kudos to everyone who got all of them. The ones that usually people miss are the F's at the end of the word of. They see the ones at the beginning and the middle of the words, but the ones at the end they tend to miss. This can become more and more apparent if somebody is suffering from a decline in the language area of the brain. So those are just some fun examples of ways that we can engage somebody with cognitive therapeutics. Now, I did just want to bring your attention to some of the things that Home Care Assistance Waterloo is doing to address COVID-19. This is our current world. We are all living in it right now. And of course, caregiving being a face-to-face service, there are a lot of risks involved. We're being told now to stay at home, stay away from people in general. So how do we provide care in a safe manner? So since the first week that COVID has become an issue within Ontario, we're looking at mid-March roughly for most of us, we put in place a couple things that are ensuring the safety of our caregivers and our clients. We're paying our caregivers more. Now the province has followed suit, just last week announced an increase for frontline workers. We've been doing this since day one. We've provided the caregivers with a service, a private service, where they can call a 1-800 number, which connects them directly to a nurse practitioner or physician. They don't have to wait on Telehealth Ontario's 9s, etc. So they can actually get access to this health care they needed, whether it's questions to be answered, access to where to go for a test, concerns about having symptoms, etc. So our caregivers can access this person anytime, and then they can be told how long they have to self-isolate for, etc., if they were to have those symptoms. Of course, we're providing all of them with personal protective equipment. PPE is a big issue these days, especially in hospitals, etc. So we do provide our caregivers with gloves, masks, sanitizer kits, depending on the situation. We may require more. One caregiver, one facility is a huge item that the government brought through 2 weeks ago. We have been doing this with our caregivers again since the beginning, minimizing the number of folks that our caregivers interact with. As is very important these days, we are trying to keep them with one client instead of hopping from facility to get their full-time hours. We just wanted to bring your attention to this plan that we have in place. As with caregiving, a lot of people are very, very hesitant to kind of approach it, and the physical needs of somebody don't go away. I mean, if somebody's declining during COVID-19, we still need to help them. So we just wanted to address these issues here, let you know that, of course, we are looking to keep everyone safe during this time. So from the cognitive therapeutics to balanced care, great caregivers and 24/7 care managers on call, we can always address any of the needs that you have. Okay, so that definitely brings us to a close on the actual presentation bit. I think at this point, if anyone does have any questions, I would like to address those. I did see one pop up in the chat from Deborah. Is the region still discharging from hospital to the first available bed and making you wait there for preferred LTC facilities? So I wanted to kind of address that as a whole. So the hospitals are prioritizing, let's call it, space for COVID-19, whether that's intensive care patients or not. They kind of did this in advance of COVID-19 hitting harder to make the space within the hospital system. So folks who were of a lower need, let's call it, in the seniors demographic, were kind of pushed out either to home with care in place through the LHIN, or to a long-term care facility if that's where they were heading in the first place. So I'm not sure if the first available bed is still in place. I know that within the long-term care system, you do have 5 choices, let's call it, your top choices. And you can technically wait for them by denying a bed in one of the other ones, should it not be your top choice. However, right now, I think they're really trying to make the best of it, and the first bed available is likely still the situation. I'm not sure, I think Matt, my colleague, is on the call as well. Matt, are you able to address that at all? Have you heard any other news from the long-term care system?
Hi, everybody. This is Matt. Thanks, Nathan. I cannot comment on this because it's such a region to region, things are in flux. And if you were to go and ask St. Mary's Hospital, you will get a very different response from Grand River. So I apologize. I'm not able to give you a sort of a definite answer, but we know that some of the long-term care facilities are not taking in any new clients because of the COVID-19 scenario. Anyone who is coming back from the hospital has been isolated for 14 days.
And that's typical right now of retirement residences and long-term care. So if they are allowing move-ins, I know a couple of retirement residents still are, but under very strict protocol. They are to self-isolate for 14 days within the residence after they move in. And of course, very limited contact. So anyone providing them meals, etc., to their room, which is the only recourse at that point, they cannot come to the dining room, of course, is in full PPE, etc., etc. So really trying to minimize the exposure risk. Long-term care homes are even more at risk due to the nature of the clients within them. And they are, again, using every means possible to minimize exposure and risk. So Deborah, I hope that helps to answer your question. Yes, the hospitals were pushing seniors out to home and or long-term care in order to make space for COVID patients. In that rush, they may have been doing whatever bed was available. But again, I'm not too clear on whether that's a policy or just what they were doing for a specific week when it was starting to happen. Now, if anyone wants to unmute and ask a question verbally or write one in the chat bar, more than willing to answer any other questions you may have at this point.
It looks like we don't have any questions. Good morning. This is Chris Hadjiyaianni speaking. I just wanted to thank everyone for joining today. If anyone wish to discuss any of those subjects any further, please contact us. That's why we are here. And Nathan, thank you very much for the good, great information that you supplied us and the great presentation. And everybody stay safe and have a great day.
Thank you, Chris and Pauline. I really appreciate you having me today. Stay safe, stay healthy, everyone. We will provide a recorded version of this webinar, of course, if you'd like to see any of the content again. I'll forward that over to Chris and Paulina so that they can send it out to you as well. Thank you very much for your time, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.